Our hardware is physically making a real diversity within communities impossible. At Building Culture, we think about buildings and architecture as the human habitat. It's the stage from which we live our lives. And to use an analogy, think about your phone. It's made up of hardware, the physical components that make up your phone, and then you run software off the hardware. All those programs and apps that actually make the hardware useful. And if you think about it, the hardware doesn't do anything by itself. Without software, your phone is an extremely expensive paperweight. It's the software that gives the hardware meaning and value. But before you can run good software, you must first have good hardware. Take, for example, how most neighborhoods built today have homogeneous housing options within a very specific size and price range. You can choose between a 1,500 square foot house or a 2,000 square foot house, 2 or 3 bedrooms, a standard lot, or maybe a corner lot. And these different options cost between $200,000 and $300,000. Now, you can scale that up or down. These neighborhoods come in various shapes and sizes. They could be high-end, they could be low-end, but the homogeneous nature is what they share in common. And you might be thinking, what's the big deal? Who cares? As long as there is something for everyone, right? Or maybe you live in a neighborhood like this and you like it. Those are all completely reasonable thoughts and reactions, and honestly, I genuinely hope everyone loves the neighborhood that they live in. In fact, that's really our mission at Building Culture, is building places that people love. But a lot of people we talk to, while they don't hate their neighborhood by any means, they also don't truly love it. They don't feel a sense of community or belonging. They lament the lack of beauty, the lack of convenience, the lack of, the constant shuffling around of kids and their daily activities. And you might be surprised by some of the ways the hardware of suburban sprawl, how it is physically built, and thereby the physical parameters it imposes, shapes your daily life, your family, your community in pretty significant ways. And in the suburban sprawl context, it shapes people's lives in ways that, if you ask them, they literally say they don't want. And some of these ways might surprise you. Let's take a look at one example today. When you have a narrow range of housing, that housing fits a very narrow range of people. And when you separate that narrow range out across distances, well, you physically segregate people along very narrow economic and demographic lines. We are physically sorting and separating different groups of people, keeping them miles apart from each other, based on whether they need a 2-bedroom or a 4-bedroom house, whether they want a yard or not, whether they want a dog, if they want to age in place or they just want a studio apartment to rent, whether they can afford a $400,000 or an $800,000 house. We don't let any of those people live in the same neighborhood. We have created neighborhoods designed for a tiny slice of the population, and then we've separated those slices out over vast distances, and in some cases, to such an extent that they don't even share the same entertainment, the same shopping, the same businesses or civic services. We are segregating people based on their income level, their marital status, whether they have kids or not, their cultural preferences, and by inconsequential and arbitrary tastes like whether they want a yard. Our hardware is physically making a real diversity within communities impossible. But this also has an effect on people who do live in these communities. The average American moves over 11 times in their lifetime. Building homogeneous communities means that as you go through life, as your income increases or decreases, as you get married, you get divorced, you have kids, your kids move out, you never have kids, you get laid off, you get a raise, you retire, you work from home, your parents move in, it doesn't matter. All the things that affect the type of housing we want at any different time to meet our current need, we have to uproot and move completely out of the neighborhood that you and perhaps your even kids spent 2, 5, 10 years in, and go to a completely new and different arbitrary collection of houses for a time until you need to move again, and over it goes. I was recently reading a marketing book called Oversubscribed, and the author, he discusses what he calls the 7-11-4 rule. He says, in the new economy, in order to buy an expensive product, people need to interact with the business in some capacity for a total of 7 hours over 11 separate interactions in 4 different locations for them to get comfortable enough to make the purchase. And of course, he is referring to interactions as commercials, podcasts, physical stores, radio, newspapers, in-person events, whatever. But my mind immediately jumped to the implications for community. If it takes 7 hours over 11 different interactions in 4 different locations to convince people to buy a product, how much time does it take for people to feel a sense of belonging, to be comfortable, to feel rooted and truly part of a community? We've made it so hard through the way that we build, through our hardware, to get anywhere close to this amount of interactions with more than a handful of people, really our direct friends and maybe family and perhaps some coworkers. Most Americans, we don't have community. We have friends, we have family, we may have some work colleagues, but those relationships, more often than not, are separated by miles of physical distance from where we actually live. Meaning, we don't live in communities. We live in storage units that provide physical shelter, but not much else. Is it a wonder that 74% of Americans report a sense of non-belonging in their local communities? That's crazy. While there may be numerous contributing factors to the skyrocketing rates of loneliness, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, substance abuse, I believe this in particular plays an outsized role. Wouldn't it make more sense to start with the software we want to run, start with how we want to live, and then back into the hardware we actually need? Building a random playground is not going to do it. Now compare a homogeneous housing mix to a diverse one. A good example here in Oklahoma City is Wheeler District. Now I'm not talking about the architecture or the style, which you may or may not like, and that's totally fine, but I'm asking you to ignore that for a moment. I want you to see what a diverse range of housing can look and feel like. Not whether you find this or that house beautiful or not, but that it can all work together cohesively in a way that enriches the neighborhood rather than detracts from it. And the reason I'm emphasizing this is because the primary public pushback people give against the idea of a diverse range of housing is that it hurts property values and things like, we don't want slums next to our homes. And that's a fair point. If I'm being honest, I don't want a slum next to my house either. But that's not what we're talking about. Take a look at this. Big $1 million houses over here, $800,000 houses over here, $500,000 houses over here, and smaller $300,000 just a block away, and garage apartments over here that could be rented out for supplemental income or a home office or just a guest house. And they're all right next to each other. And then all these homes and apartments that range from $300,000 to $1.5 million, from studio apartment rentals to luxury condos, they all share the same businesses and services. They share the same tacos. They share the same beer, the same coffee shop, the same barber shop, and countless other businesses. And this neighborhood is just getting started. And what's the practical effect? Well, people can stay within the same community much longer as they move through life and their life circumstances change. Just imagine how this could change your sense of belonging, of community over time. You can have all kinds of relationships through small, consistent touches over a long period of time in different circumstances at different locations. It's actually possible to hit the 7-11-4 rule when we build more like this. This is what you call a neighborhood. This has the potential for long-term community belonging and rootedness. And this is what you call a collection of human storage units. And it's not your fault. You haven't been given any options. This meets your needs, your physical needs at the stage of life you're in, so you live there. You made the best decision you could. But what about our deeper human needs? What about our kids' needs? If you're thinking, I'd never live in houses that close to each other, that's fine. This is an inner city neighborhood I'm showing you, a mile from downtown Oklahoma City. It's going to be more dense, but the same principles can apply to more suburban neighborhoods, but at a less dense scale. For locals, if you've been to Carlton Landing, that's a great example of a lower density suburban neighborhood, but still with a large range of housing. Not every neighborhood is supposed to look or feel the same, and that's the point. We're advocating for choices. We are advocating for the right to build these kinds of neighborhoods. Not that every neighborhood should be built exactly this way or that, and then people can have real choices. Even if you love living in the country or the suburbs, that's totally fine. But you still want thriving and lively districts and neighborhoods to frequent on occasion. Wouldn't it be nice to not have to fly thousands of miles across oceans to experience rich urban beauty and vibrancy? It's not either or, it's both and we need policies that allow for both. Next episode, we are going to dive into some of the other ways our hardware is dictating how we live, and more often than not, to the detriment of our stated goals and what we say we actually want. The point I'm making today is, I hope you can see how our architecture, our hardware, is not neutral. It's built to run certain kinds of hardware and not others. It encourages certain behaviors and discourages certain behaviors. And you didn't have anything to do with that. You had no choice in the matter. The people who regulate and design and build hardware chose for you. They have determined how you can live, what your options are without your input. And when people ask why our laws and regulations are as they are, the answer we often get is because that's what the code says, or that's just the way it is, or that would make it too hard on us. Says the public works departments who are supposed to be in service of the public good, in service to you and to us as citizens, not in service of what makes their jobs the easiest. Keep in mind, there are a lot of things we don't do now that we did 60 years ago, and for good reason. Just because laws exist does not mean that they should, that they are good laws in the public interest. Most of the regulations I'm referring to were birthed at the same time we were imposing redlining and the destruction of inner cities with urban renewal, which was a federal program implemented by local municipalities. We need to stop letting our regulations dictate how we live and start with how we want to live. Start with our goals and aspirations for health and safety and privacy, community, belonging, beauty, opportunity, resilience, and environmental stewardship, a place for kids, dignified elderly living, diversity, and then create the hardware that lets us live how we want, and then regulations to guide the building of that hardware. Thanks for watching, and I hope you join me next time as we dive even deeper into some of the other ways our hardware is dictating our lifestyle in contradiction to what we say we actually want. And if this content resonates with you, please like, message, subscribe, and share. It really helps us out. You know, our goal is to shift the conversation about how we build our towns and cities and neighborhoods and to have the maximum impact we can possibly have. And we need your help to do that. Thanks for watching. See you on the next episode.